The Wellness Show, episode 115.
Welcome to The Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyson Bannigan, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more. So welcome to the Wellness Show, and today we have the return visit with Martin Pytela, and today we're going to talk about the 4 body types. So let's begin. Martin, what are the 4 body types?
The body types are visible. They're expressed through the physical appearance, but they're actually caused by endocrine dominance. Somehow, genetically, each one of us ends up with dominance of either the adrenal, pituitary, or the thyroid gland. And in men, all men are always gonadal dominant. In women, if you have gonadal dominant or the ovarian dominance, then there's the 4th type. So men are only 3 types, women can be the 4th. And what happens is, I think somehow could be genetic, I suppose, we evolve into very distinct physical appearances that seem to be also connected with what we should be eating and shouldn't be eating if we want to be healthy.
So this is all evolutionary theory then, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are different names people have used for this thing. In one system, they're known as ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. In this particular classification, it is the thyroid, pituitary, and adrenal. I guess it would be easiest to try and illustrate what happens.
Okay, go for it.
The most common type that we have in Europeans are the thyroid dominant. A typical thyroid dominant person will be slender arms, slender legs. They will start adding their weight primarily in the middle. So if they go fat, they turn into the apple shape. If you start adding weight, it happens mainly on the belly, or starts on the belly. So if the lady is starting to look pregnant and isn't, it's the expression of the thyroid type. Each of the types has a craving that is typical for it. In the thyroid, the craving is for starchy foods, sweet things. So a dessert after dinner and cookies in the evening, or at least bread and butter, something like that. Which, to illustrate diametrically opposite to that, would be the adrenal type. The adrenal type is built like a weightlifter, stocky, deep chest, strong arms, strong legs. The difference between a quarterback, who would typically be a thyroid type, and a linebacker, who would typically be an adrenal type. And the adrenal type will be very resilient and very comfortable with loads of stress. Would be tempted to eat savory foods. That would be like meats and sausages and charcuterie and all kinds of spicy things like that. And if they start adding weight on, it's going to be all over. Big chest, big shoulders, big hips, just widening all over the place. Built like a refrigerator.
So when you have these desires, that means that you're actually, that propensity to eat that is actually where you would tend to gain weight from those foods. Am I getting that right?
Well, the thyroid type will indeed gain weight on starch, on carbohydrate, and lose weight on fat. Wow. Which is bizarre, right?
That's bizarre.
You would think that they would do well as a vegetarian but they don't. They do best as a slightly ketogenic, slightly proteiny. And if you look at it, most of the tall, slender people are the Nordic types, the Swedes, the Norwegians, and the likes. And they lived in the colder climate, so they needed to definitely eat proteins, especially in the winter, because there was not a whole lot of else around.
So that would mean things like fish and fish oils would be important for their
Yes,
times.
for sure. Yeah. Yes, would be.
So
There are some. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so those are two of them. So what are the other ones?
So the third one that's common to both genders is pituitary. Pituitary dominance is the one that craves creamy yeah, I guess creamy would be the best word. Ice cream, whipping cream, cheesecake. That would be the sweet and creamy temptation. They would be built more like a Cabbage Patch doll. Larger head, smaller body, but even fat distribution all around. So if you could think of a typical nerd, the curly-haired, nerdy-looking person with large head and I don't know what's the word, Pillsbury Doughboy body type.
Right.
And interestingly, so creamy things like yogurt or whatnot are food for the brain. So it feeds you well if you need to do intellectual work. Anyway, the antidote to that, if you could believe, is the red meats, the organ meats like liver, kidneys, heart, brain, and red meats, steak. Who would have expected that that's the health diet for that sort of person? But it is.
Wow. So where's the predominance? Is there culture, like you were saying, Swedes and Nordic or this way? Is this like Metabolic?
Yeah, those would be. Yeah, so these ones, the thyroid were the coastals. These one would be the cold climate inlanders. Like they would be the ultimate, like the hunters inland, deep inland. What's curious about all of this is the size of meals that they prefer. A thyroid type would like to or should have 3 meals about even size, each of them with some protein. So a couple of eggs for breakfast with something, even sized dinner, lunch, not too big, not too small, and same for the dinner. The adrenal type would prefer to eat nothing in the morning, a light lunch, and a large dinner. Like they would be happy to eat nothing until dinner.
Wow.
And the pituitary is the other way around. They would like to eat a very, very large breakfast, medium lunch, and forget about the dinner altogether. So all of these stories that you hear from out there in the folklore that eat like start your day like a king and end it like a pauper, or whatever prognostications about how you should be eating, they all are based in some specific localized, I don't know what you call it, population, and it works for them and it doesn't work for the others.
So this could lead to all sorts of problems. Like, for example, I'm thinking of the French culture. If you have a certain food way in which you eat, like a lot of creams and a lot of sauces and all that, and you're not in that body type, but you're French and that's your diet, then that can lead to all sorts of different complications, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If you were a North African who grew up on whose ancestors have been pre-selected for living on dates, figs, pomegranates, and camel milk, and then you move to France and they try to convert you into eating smoked sausage and ham and aged cheese, it just doesn't work. You don't feel right. You don't feel at home.
So how does the average person begin to sort all this out?
Well, average person gives me a call and says, would you help me?
Right. So it's really not something that's very easy to figure out on your own, right?
Well, actually, it's not that bad. Like, for instance, I have a book here. Here it is. I'm showing it to the camera, and it's by Dr. Adrenal, and it's called Body Type Diet and Lifetime Nutrition Plan. Elliot Abravanel was a Frenchman, and he was the doctor to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
Interesting.
So he was very much in large groups of people, and he was able to actually sort out whether people should be or shouldn't be vegetarians. Because, of course, in the Indian tradition, it's totally natural for folks to be eating a vegetarian diet, especially when you're wanting to advance yourself spiritually. It goes with yoga that you want to practice nonviolence, you want to be not killing anything in your own convenience or food and so on. Vegetarianism is a wonderful thing. In fact, I've tried it. I have been practicing yoga for many, many years, since my 20s. And at some point, we decided that we're going to go all in, vegetarian, then vegan. And we tried it for several years. And I'm so I could almost make it as a vegetarian. My wife was in total trouble. She was just completely withering away. So we realized that that just wasn't going to be. We just have to deal with the reality of our genetic heritage. If I was an East Indian fellow who grew up in a climate where all I had to do is reach to the nearest tree and pluck another piece of tropical fruit, I might have done well, but not with what I've got.
So this raises all sorts of ethical questions for lots of people, especially, as you said, using a prime example about, to be spiritual or to achieve enlightenment, then one should be on a vegetarian diet, and that, it increases one's ability to do all this. But what you're saying is that's all very well and good, but that's genetically or climate specific, both, I guess, are interconnected. And
right.
when you're not from that region and you don't have that genetic body type, then you're asking for trouble.
Right. If you could visualize a year 1220, a child is born somewhere in Switzerland. He's going to be fed rye bread, aged cheese, sauerkraut, and I don't know what else all winter long.
Mm-hmm.
If he's genetically suited to that, then he's going to be fine by springtime. But if he's not, then he's going to be weak, and he'll probably succumb to some illness. In fact, it was very common for a typical woman to give birth to a dozen of children, but maybe raise only 4 or 5 to adulthood. And I suspect that was nature's way of sorting out the genetic pool so that they could be specifically adapted to the local milieu, the terrain, food resource. Right. That's how an Eskimo, or I guess we can call him Eskimo, is capable of living on a diet that's 95% fat.
Right. And without that fat, he can't survive. It's not so
right.
much, it's not so much the meat; it's the fat. I've heard that's the case with a polar bear and the seal. It's not the meat that the polar bear is going after; he's going after the fat.
That is correct. Yeah. In fact, the ketogenic diet is gaining in popularity, and that's mainly helping the body switch from using carbohydrates for energy to using lipids or fats for energy, which is slower burning, more conducive to sustained energy as opposed to these short bursts of quick fire. I guess the difference would be, like, if you have your fireplace, you could be burning newspaper or you can be burning birch logs.
So I guess when you're burning birch logs, if I'm understanding correctly, that also sends signals to your body to start processing the different types of fats that may be stored in the body. Is that
yes? Oh yeah, it is that. Yeah, here's an interesting concept. when you eat carbohydrates, it creates a glucose spike in your blood. In fact, to explain, starch is a string of three carbohydrates, a string of three glucose chains hooked together. Starch decomposes into glucose faster than fruit or even sugar. The glycemic index is higher in a white potato or bowl of rice than it is in a bowl of sugar.
Wow.
Anyway, so the high glycemic index, it converts into glucose. The glucose now creates a spike in your blood. The body says, too much. Out comes insulin. And insulin's job is not to modulate your glucose level. Its job is to create reserves for times of famine. And so what does it do? It creates deposits of fat wherever the body wants to store it. So that's what happens. When you're eating lipids or fats, this doesn't take place. There's no insulin involved in that metabolism.
Wow. So, yeah, so this is really fascinating, but almost confusing too, because it's so contrary to what we've been taught about how to look at our bodies, look at our diet, and, you know, the ethics of spirituality and, you know, fasting and dieting and the whole thing and being spiritual, whatever that means. It runs counter to what we're being taught.
Right. I can try and justify my eating of animal food, or I guess animal food is just, you know, this is just one big life into life wheel of transformation, right? Like the sunlight is transformed into grass, and the grass is transformed into a rabbit, and the rabbit is transformed into rabbit stew, and the rabbit stew is transformed into Martin, and Martin is going to someday end up being the fertilizer for the grass.
Mm-hmm. And
so it's just one big circle of life.
Right. And so the ethics around this is really what you're saying is that when it comes to these sorts of diets, really the bottom line is the energy, how you feel in your body and how you're processing energy, and whether you have the, let's call it the vim, vigor, and vitality, for lack of better words, that gets you through your day is the key indicator about whether you need to be considering a dietary change that is in line with what you're talking about. That would be the first.
Yes. Right. So, right. If you have cravings, you are not doing the right stuff.
Right.
The 8 p.m. craving for sweet things is essentially a signal that you have not eaten enough proteins earlier in the day. I would say that the thyroid body type is the most badly served body type in the North American nutritional industry, because it has been told that, oh yeah, you just reduce fats, go fat free, go salad, and eat 4 servings of carbohydrates, right? Wow. That's the famous 4 food groups, or whatever they call it.
That would just bloat the person right up and also pack the weight on, if I'm understanding what you said.
That's correct. And that's why we're seeing this epidemic of obesity, is because the government subsidies to the industrial agriculture are favoring growing of large amounts of easy to store foods, which would be wheat, corn, soy. Anyway, the 3, I think that's them, the major grains. And so they are really easy to grow, easy to store, easy to put away, create strategic reserves. And then, of course, now that you've subsidized them, they're sold for cheaper than they cost to grow. And so the poorer the person, the more they are forced into this high-carb diet. So the poorer the person, the more likely to become obese, because they're forced to eat on the subsidized foods. It's perverted.
Yes. So let's move from being perverted, which it definitely is, to waving a magic wand and everything were possible. Then how would we turn this around? Would the first thing be that there'd be people like you that would be available to help individuals sort out what sort of genetic makeup or dietary type they are? Would that be the first step?
Right, yes. I have actually made it available for free on the Life Enthusiast's website, life-enthusiast.com. You can look up the podcast called Weight Loss Secrets, where I show it with illustrations. I can just show you an example illustration. Here is a G-type woman. We haven't discussed that one yet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a picture of a woman that's either slim or gaining weight.
Yes.
And the way it looks is a G-type, as in gonadal dominant woman, will crave spicy foods, and the spicy foods will stimulate her ovaries to produce more estrogen, which will give her more of the secondary sexual characteristics. So her hips will grow wider. So you can think of Jennifer Lopez and have it vividly in front of you. Up from the waist is one size, and from the waist down is one or two sizes bigger than you'd expect.
Mm.
So
this would certainly help a lot of people with a lot of personal hell that they've created for themselves by understanding, particularly movie stars, and staying within a diet range or within a weight range for certain roles. And I can just
right.
there must be hundreds, thousands, if not millions of people that are really caught in a bind, that if they knew this information, their life would be a lot easier and less of a roller coaster weight-wise.
Right, and this information has not been withheld from anybody. This book by Dr. Abravanel has been around since the 1960s.
Wow.
This is not secret. It's just that the popular culture doesn't want to see it. It doesn't suit the industry. They want to push the grains, I suppose.
So if we went to that site that you said and we looked at those body types, could we then figure out who we are, or what, by the way that our body is shaping up? And then
yes,
on that book, we could start to make some decisions?
Absolutely, yeah. In the book, it's explained. We practice it. I am a CMTA, Certified Metabolic Typing Advisor. So under the metabolic typing, we include the endocrine dominance as one of the things that we need to check on, because the endocrine dominance will dictate what foods will make you fat and what foods will make you slim, and how you can maintain proper balance. There are these two other things that we have discussed in our previous conversation, which is whether you will be alkalized by fats and proteins or whether you will be acidified by them. That's the dominance of either the oxidative system or the autonomic regulatory system. And depending which you are, you will, how do I put it? Most nutritional books, the healthy nutrition was written for the autonomics. It says proteins are acidifying and carbohydrates and fruit juices are alkalizing.
Right.
That's only true for autonomics. Oxidizers have it completely backwards.
Now, is that part, I know we talked about that in a previous interview, and I encourage people to go back and listen to that, but is that explained in the book as well?
No, not this book. No, this fellow, Abravanel, he only understood this one thing, and he only focused on the body type, which is still wonderful because it teaches you whether you will be slim or not slim,
and why,
how you can control it and why. Yeah.
So for the other information, is there a book you recommend? I know you did have some links and they're in the last interview to take to information as well, but is there a book or
Yes. Yes, I didn't think of bringing it here to the camera, but the book is by William Wolcott, Wolcott, and it's the Metabolic Typing Diet. I think that's not the exact title of the book, but it explains it.
Right.
And there is an online metabolic typing test. There are 3 levels of it. The first level, as you would find on drmercola.com or mercola.com, Dr. Mercola's site. That's the most basic. Then there is the medium level at metabolictyping.com. And then there's the advanced level, which is only available through health coaches such as myself. And then there's the ultra high, the 3,000 questions, the ones that's for people who are so sick that they really need to have highly specialized, individualized attention.
sort of bring you back from the edge.
Yes.
And I guess that's doable. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't have developed that. I mean,
Yes, I mean, it's totally based on research, based on solid data. It's highly applicable, and it explains biological individuality. It explains that that what works for one person will not work for another, and why. Like, most people are just wondering whether they should be on the Ornish diet or the paleo diet or the Atkins diet or
Right.
the South Beach diet, and they try this one and that one and just bounce around. With the test, I can tell you
right.
what's going to work for you and why.
So that's probably one of the most important tips that you're putting out is stop being hard on yourself. Stop trying to figure this out on your own, because you probably don't have the right information to make the right decision anyway. So come to at least read the book, or even better, come and have a session with Martin and let him, with his background, help you figure it out so that you can take your life back and have some way to communicate with your body in a way that your body can understand and help you achieve the goals that you have. Whether it's, vitality, weight loss, whatever it is, or even improving your health, or coming back from a near-death experience or a fatal disease. I think that's all. What you're really saying in all this is that this is part of the path back from the edge of wherever you find yourself, that you know that you need to bring about a fundamental change in your life.
Yes. Yeah, most chronic disease, which will include the major killers, cancer, diabetes, heart, I guess circulatory disease, blood pressure, heart attacks, those are essentially caused by people mismatching their genetics with their diet. Not everybody was meant to be eating the Italian farmer food that has become predominant in North America.
Mm-hmm. Wow, powerful. So, I mean, this is one of the key ways in which, the 50% obesity rate, one out of, 2 people in the U.S. is having some type of problem with their weight, or not problem with they're obese. So, I mean, it's a major critical problem. So this is one of the ways in which to begin to resolve that. So,
that's the living part.
Yeah.
But then there's the dying part, the premature deaths, which are, the blood pressures, the heart attacks, the diabetes, the cancer. All of those are essentially preventable, and nutrition has very large, share in how things turn out.
Right. So the whole process of healing and turning the corner is all involved in this. So we have about a minute and 30 seconds to go, a minute and a half. So could you, that was a lot of information. So could you summarize it up? I mean, what's the message you really want to get out to people?
There's such a thing as biological individuality. It's predicated on your genetics. It's your ancestors that have evolved and adapted to a specific localized food resource, and you have inherited it, but you have probably moved away from that local place where it was appropriate. But you still need to eat like your ancestors, not where you are, but where you came from. And when you do that, then you will have much greater health than what you have now. And if you want to get some specifics, feel free to contact me. The website I'm at is life-enthusiast.com, and I'm available by phone at 866-543-3388.
Well, thank you very much. Again, a very powerful message that you have, one that can help many, many people turn the corner in their life. So thank you for returning to the show. And, if you feel called to do more on this, then we can have you back and we can do more information on each type. So once again, thank you. I greatly appreciate this, and bye for now.
Thank you.
For quality online wellness products, courses, and services, visit our sponsors, thewellnessstore.ca and the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy located at thewellnessacademy.ca. To stay in touch, visit us at thewellnessshow.ca. And until next time, be healthy, wealthy, and wise.